Brett McMurphy earlier today on the story involving the Big Ten future schedules. We've discussed that a little bit amongst ourselves and also with those of you in the chat room too. Brett McMurphy joins us on 365 Sports. Brett, thank you very much from Action Network HQ. So is this to protect people because they're adding USC and UCLA, or is this actually to protect those in the middle pack of the Big Ten so they can try to get to enough wins to get to a bowl game?
Yeah, I think it's to protect the middle tier and the bottom tier, if you will, because, they already have 9 conference games, obviously, but with USC and UCLA, there's more bodies to climb over, if you will, to get to the top of the league. And I think it's more for, this isn't for the Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, et cetera. It's for basically everyone else to basically be able to schedule an automatic win, or at least you hope it's an automatic win. You can't lose those games, but we've seen those upsets. And so that can get you to, 6 wins, bowl eligibility, and keep the fan bases somewhat subdued until next year. But again, it's not a requirement. It's an option. You can play 3 Power Fives if you want. Mm-hmm. Nobody's in the non-conference. Nobody's that stupid except West Virginia. So I don't think I don't know if we'll see much change or not. But it's funny, they've kind of had this. They've actually had this requirement, for the last several years. But then it wasn't. But then they kept granting exemptions to this rule, where basically a team would go, well, hey, we're playing Cincinnati. Does Cincinnati count? And this is before Cincinnati got the college football playoff, and the Big Ten would say, okay, well, they raised this much value as far as TV markets and that sort of thing. So like, okay, they count. Okay, BYU, they count. Even UConn counted at one point. So it is surprising to me, because I actually thought with the college football playoff expanding to 12 teams, that we actually would see more Power 5 non-conference matchups, because in theory, you can lose those type of games and you're not eliminated from making a 12-team field. You lose those games in a 14 field, and you greatly decrease your odds. So like anything else in college football, college athletics, it's, you don't have to wait so long until it changes. So we'll have to see what happens. I do know a lot of people kind of looked into this and kind of, in their opinion, they thought, hey, here's this makes it look like the Big Ten's going to 10 games, conference games. From people I talked to, they're going to stay at 9. Because if you add 10, then you're guaranteeing an additional loss for, 8 of the teams in the conference. And that's hard to swallow. So I think if you keep it at 9, you can schedule your group of 5s. You can add a FCS program in there, which ironically in 2024, future Big Ten member USC will be the only school in the country that has never, ever played an FCS opponent, because Notre Dame will play an FCS opponent last year. Them USC were the last 2 standing.
Brett, how much of this, though, could change after the first 2 years of this, where everything could get thrown into flux all of a sudden?
Absolutely. I mean, at that point, the conference memberships could be drastically changed. The Big Ten could be on 16 schools. The SEC could be beyond 16. Again, they can change anything on a dime if they want. But, obviously this was a good time frame for them to do this, with the Big Ten going up to 16 schools in 2024. And, again, for scheduling, they want to give out as much advance notice as you can, because for some strange reason, these schools and athletic directors love to schedule games, literally, I'm going to guesstimate here, about 40 years in advance. Is that about right, guys? So, it's they want to give them as much notice as possible. But certainly, if there is a drastic change in conference membership, they would obviously change that, revamp it, do whatever they need to do.
Brett, what did you think about as we get into this world where there's clearly separation that's occurring all over the place? It's just to what extent we don't quite know yet. I know the FCS schools, there's mixed feelings from those coaches on how much they love the payday and the butt whooping most of the time versus how much better it actually makes their teams. But speaking of separation, Mike Oresco and his comments on the American Athletic Conference and the letter that he sent out yesterday, we talked a bit about it. Just what were your thoughts on the Power 6? No, it's not the Power 5. No, it's not any power label whatsoever. Where did you kind of stand on what he had to say?
How much longer can you interview me? Because that's how long I will go off on this.
As long as you want, man.
I will make it brief. So the first time he did this, I think he did this back in the end of March, if I remember correctly. And it was a lot shorter, but basically said there shouldn't be any Power 5s. And I tweeted something like, isn't this ironic that, the guy who was pushing that his league was a Power 6 and he put it on the first down chains and he put it on the field and he had all these logos made up and yada, 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 is the guy who now says, well, we shouldn't have these designations. I guess he's right. And so I vow from this point forward, as I tweeted yesterday, I will only refer to the conferences as the Power 2, which is the Big Ten SEC, the middle three, which are the remaining former Power 5 school conferences, and then there's still the Group of 5. I think Mike wants it to be the Power 2 and everyone else because he wants to say that they're on equal footing. And again, can any team in the American beat any team and in any other conference? Absolutely. But this is not about on the field wins and losses. This is about power. This is about how much your media rights deals are worth. This is how much you're worth to the college football playoff. This is how attractive you are to bowl partners. I mean, that is the power. It's not whether you can win or lose on the field. But yeah, he dropped a 2,600 word open letter yesterday. I don't know if any of you guys had any background in writing, but you probably would have got paid a lot if you wrote a 2,600 word article. Your editor would have chopped it in half. So all I know is by the time I got done reading it, I think 3 more schools announced they were leaving the league. So, look, another former reporter, not another former reporter, a former reporter I know used to cover the Big Ten. He said Woody Hayes, this is a great line, Woody Hayes basically had a way of calling it, kind of how the conferences are now. The Power 2, which is basically all the starters flew on one plane, and the rest of the plane was AO, all you others. So maybe that's how we should refer to the conferences now, the Power 2 and AO, all you others. But yeah, I know I've rambled on almost as long as Mike Oresco's letter, but I thought it's a joke. It's hypocritical. You can't claim you're Power 6 one year and then the next year come back and say, hey, There's no Power 5, there's no Group 5, we're all equals, hogwash. There's a reason why conferences, bowls, playoff pay more for some schools more than another, and that's the reality. There's a totem pole, there's a pecking order, and right now, the American is basically Conference USA.
Yeah, Mac Rhodes brought up the Power 6 reference to the Big East when Oresco was running the Big East before the transition. Brett, we are still waiting, and I know it's a story that just never ends, and hopefully one day it will with the Pac-12. Let me ask you this. This is just somewhat hypothetical, and I'm not trying to stir it up, but I'm curious. Right now, it appears as if what they're waiting on is some sort of legitimate deal that whatever percentage is Apple Plus and the other percentage is linear. Do you ever see a scenario when the Big Ten would ever again look at Oregon? Not again. Would they look at Oregon and Washington if somebody from the Pac-12 was to leave for the Big 12?
First, kudos for, I don't want to stir it up, but I appreciate that line of questioning.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to stir it up, but no, look, this is what I've said for several months. Probably the last time that I talked to you guys, and I keep hearing this. This is if, but this is a big if. But if Colorado or Arizona, who, as of we talk right now at 4 p.m. Central Time, they appear the most likely candidates to lead the Pac-12 for the Big 12. Mm-hmm. Does that mean they're going to do it? Absolutely not. Could they do it? Absolutely. If they do that, again, that's a big if. If they do that, I've been told by people that I trust that at that point, the Big Ten could take a harder look at Oregon and Washington, because at that point, Oregon and Washington would, not that they're not desperate now, but they would be even more desperate at that point to get out of the league. They could get Oregon and Washington for even a smaller share until they gradually ramp them up to a full share. And again, the only reason the Big Ten would do it is they have to be, financially it has to make sense as far as the TV market. I'm told that the Big Ten and Fox do not want to have blood on their hands from they're the reason that the Pac-12 blew up. So in a way, they're kind of sitting back to see what happens with Colorado and or Arizona. If they go to the Big 12 and that opens the floodgate, then I think you would see Oregon and Washington come in. Now, would it be in 2024? I don't know if it could be done that quickly. I do know, I reported this last August or December, it all runs together, that they had had in-person meetings with the Big Ten. I've been told they basically have been vetted. They have been cleared. They are ready for takeoff. All the questions have been answered about Oregon and Washington. It's just when and if the Big Ten decides they want to add those schools. Now, what makes that even more complicated is if Colorado and Arizona don't do anything and stay in the Pac-12, and you guys have seen the speculation about any of the teams from the ACC decide to try to climb over the wall and get out of the grant of rights before 2036 and are successful, then the Big Ten certainly would look at a number of ACC schools, and so that could impact Oregon and Washington. So that would be another reason for Oregon and Washington to try to get out as soon as possible. You didn't ask me this, but I'll just bring it up. I know a couple weeks ago I was in Arizona, and Dennis Dodd reported ESPN was no longer part of the Pac-12 dealings. I think The Athletic and Sports Illustrated reported the opposite. What I've been told is that ESPN is going to always talk to the Pac-12. If they can get something for pennies on the dollars, they are going to do it. So technically, they are never out of the running for the Tier 1 rights. If they can get the Tier 1 rights for chump change, they will do it, okay? Realistically, that's probably not going to happen at the price the Pac-12 wants. Now, I was also told that for the same example I gave you with the Big Ten not wanting the Pac-12's blood on their hands, ESPN feels the same way. And so basically, when Dennis's report came out, my understanding is that, ESPN does not want to be viewed as breaking up a conference or blowing up a conference. And so that's, I think, why you saw conflicting views on this, is because at the end of the day, ESPN doesn't want to, want the perception that they blew up the league. And I want to be very clear. They're not responsible for what's going on with Pac-12. So, but they also don't want it to look that way. But it reminds me of, and I was at ESPN when this happened, when the Big East had a monster TV deal offer from ESPN. The Pac-12 had actually just got a monster deal, I believe, with Larry Scott. boy, the good old days. And this is, I think, 2013, 14, 15, around then. The Big East turned down this monster TV deal at the time because they thought they could get more money based on what the Pac-12 got. Well, guess what? ESPN said, okay, you don't want this deal? Fine. Then you go find something else because the Big East wanted more money. So the Big East went and they signed a deal with NBC Sports. And because ESPN had the previous rights, ESPN had a right of refusal. That meant that whatever deal that the Big East got, ESPN could match it or they could just let them go. So when the Big East came back to them with this new deal from NBC Sports, it was actually less money that ESPN initially was going to pay them that the Big East turned down. So then when ESPN said, wait, NBC Sports is paying you this much? Then ESPN decided, well, if it's for that small amount of money, then we will retain your rights. Could something similar to that happen with the Pac-12? It's very possible. But, I kind of been all over the map with your question here.
No.
But basically, that's I'm trying to kind of sum everything up with kind of how these reports come out with Pac-12, how the negotiations are going. And one last thing, I know you guys are well aware of John Olerand and Andrew Marchand, the New York Post Sports Business Journal. They did a podcast today, actually came out, and they had a reference to what was going on with the Pac-12 and a lot of the same things I'm hearing. Amazon, is probably not going to be a partner because they just want one game. They're not going to get the top game. I've heard from people that I trust these people very much. I've had people tell me Apple is no longer part of the Pac-12 deal. I've had people tell me Apple definitely is part of the Pac-12 deal. We will not find out. But one thing that jumped out at me, it just kind of simplified things, is Andrew Marchand of the New York Post, who's a sports media reporter. That's his only duty. Is he said the thing about the Pac-12 is they've said a lot of things that have not been true. And I guess he's talking about media that covers the Pac-12, Pac-12 presidents, and all these different things. So until we actually see what the Pac-12 is going to get, and I guess, the latest from the Washington State president is it's still, a couple months off, then we're not going to know what happened. But if Colorado or Arizona decide to make a move before they get the numbers to the Big 12, then all hell breaks loose.
Brett, I've asked this to a couple of different people because I'm curious on their answer to this question. Do the Pac-12 leaders, they may know in reality that USC and UCLA and therefore that LA television market is gone, but do they believe it to be different? Like, have they accepted the fact that your conference is not the same without them? Because it appears to me in some regards that they are moving forward as saying, like, yes, we understand that they're gone, but nothing should change.
Yeah, I mean, presidents, for the most part, don't deal with their athletics unless there's a huge issue or put out a fire or something like that. So I don't necessarily think the presidents are looking at it that way. I do know from someone that I talked to that's pretty plugged in and has a good source at one of the remaining 10 Pac-12 schools. They had somebody tell them, again, sometimes everyone gets so down in the weeds with all this stuff where sometimes just the simplest answer is usually the best answer. And basically, they had somebody at Pac-12 school tell them, look, should we stay in the Pac-12 and do what we can to stay in the Pac-12 and make the best of it, or should we go to the Big 12 because what's left in the Pac-12 is not the Pac-12 that we joined. There's no USC, there's no UCLA, there could be San Diego State, SMU, Colorado State, Tulane, New Mexico. Pick your flavor of the month. It could be joining the league. So that's something that these schools and presidents got to decide. How long do we keep holding on to this Pac-12 when in reality, you brought up a great point, you're no longer in LA. And yeah, you can bring in San Diego State. They're a fine program, but they're not the LA market. They're different. They're not the same. If they were the same as USC and UCLA, they would have been in the Pac-12, 20 years ago. They're not. That's reality. That's not me being negative against the Aztecs. That's reality. When we talked about, Resco and the pecking order, there's a pecking order, and there's a reason San Diego State is not in a Power 5 conference. So, these presidents have to look at a lot of different things. It's difficult to make this decision. And the other thing, kind of unrelated but related, is I notice whenever a university president makes a public statement or does an interview and they talk about how committed they are to the Pac-12 and, everything's going to work and we want to stay in our league and everything like that, everyone's like, okay, see, nothing's going to happen there. He just said it. And I'm like, wait a second. You guys, this sounds exactly like an athletic director supporting his coach the day before he fires it.
Mm-hmm.
All of these university presidents are 1,000% committed to their conference until they're not. And so what do you expect them to say? Oh, by the way, we love it in the Pac-12, but in a month and a half, we're leaving the conference. No one's ever going to say that. So it's just funny, but it's on social media. I'm blown away by the responses of the Pac-12 and the Big 12 fans. It's become almost as toxic as Republicans and Democrats trying to determine if the sky's blue or not. So I just want. I could care less what happens. I just want something so it's final. We know who's going to be in what conference, and let's move forward.
Yeah, I mentioned that it's the only thing I've ever seen where you draw a line in the sand for red states and blue states other than Congress or politics, and you're right on that. You mentioned litigation, and the Big Ten, of course, has USC and UCLA. And, Brett, I know you have to go, and we appreciated your time. We appreciate your time. Do you feel like with the Big Ten or would either of the networks of ESPN and Fox, would they have any issues with litigation or have to worry about litigation, or even the Big 12, since there's this thought that they're trying to basically just pick away at the Pac-12? Or is that just the Big Ten because of what they've already done, not need to be the one that does it again, at least immediately until somebody else does?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything that the networks have to worry about. I mean, look, all the realignment that's happened over the past 20 years, we would have seen something at this point. The only litigation is going to be if Team A is leaving Conference A to go to Conference B. The litigation is how much is it going to take to get out. If an agreement can't be made, then there would be litigation. I don't think, obviously that wouldn't happen with the Pac-12 because their grant of rights ends after the 2023 season. Where it could come into play, and there's going to be some lawyers, in the Southeast, they're going to make a boatload of money, is if and when some ACC schools try to get out of that grant of rights before 2036, there's going to be, over under on lawsuits is probably, the number of, passing yards for Bryce Young last year. I mean, it's going to be crazy, all the stuff that'll be flying around. But that's usually just between the conference and the schools. I don't see anyone. Even if you wanted to litigate against a network, you're suing basically the hand that feeds you.
Yeah, no,
it's going to pay you money. So you kind of deal with it and kind of move on.
It's not like when Bowlesby did the cease and desist for ESPN and the American or whoever it was, because they were fighting for their absolute last breath at the time, and it worked. It actually worked. But, yeah, at the same time, they still ended up with a deal with ESPN, an extension. But, yeah, that's a dangerous play without a doubt. Hey, Brett, great stuff. I know we took a lot longer than I asked you to be on with us. We appreciate your time. And maybe before we get to the early part of the summer, which is just around the corner, there will be an end, whatever that is, with the other conference looking for a TV deal in the Pac-12. Thanks for your time.
You got it, guys. Thank you.
Brett McMurphy, Action Network HQ.
Yeah, we covered a lot there. A lot.